Brunch, a taste of Tobago. Now, guys, I hope that you are situated. I hope that you are ready to take in what's going to happen today. It's a really interesting program. And if you were paying attention, and I hope that you were, we were speaking about mental health. We also touched on breast cancer. And so now we're going to group and we're going to gel the two topics together. And so we are going to be speaking about breast cancer and its effects on mental health. Joining me is Billie Sterling Lewis, Director of MPAC Change Concepts. And we're going to have a wonderful conversation this morning. So, good morning to you and blessings to you. How are you, my sister?
Good morning. Good morning. You look lovely. I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me on.
You know, I've been waiting to have this discussion for some time now, and I'm hoping that we can really delve in as much as possible. Breast cancer, that's a whole other vibe right there. And then we have the
Yeah.
mental health issues that follow. Now, you know, when the diagnosis, when you receive the diagnosis, it's like a turning point. It's like a turning
Yes.
point in the life of the person who is suffering. Let's delve in. What are some of the impacts that receiving a news of this nature can have on the mental health of a person? Let's start there.
Sure. And that's a great place to start. I will also add to that in so many ways, just the word cancer throws people into a tailspin. That's why in the wellness movement, we try to talk about the big C and take the fear out of the big C. And there are other things that bring fear too, but cancer definitely brings fear, not just for women, but for anyone who receives a diagnosis or receives any news that they have to check for something that may be linked to cancer. So, one of the things that happens is, as I just said, fear is one of those first emotions that come up. The person begins to question what they did or didn't do well enough. Immediately, many times they go into, am I going to make it? So their thoughts of death and life issues coming into play. In that, they often go into what we call secondary losses. So I'll talk about cancer and the mental health implications from a loss perspective, because cancer diagnosis and having cancer is actually a loss. It's a loss of health. That's the primary loss. But the secondary losses come in like, what about my children? What if something happens? And I'm saying all these things, and they've just received the diagnosis. But that is how far the mind tends to go when somebody receives that news. So fear and anxiety, a lot of sadness comes into play. And if we go with what we call the stages of loss, or stages of grief that we often use, put forward by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that initial shock takes hold and the person goes through a lot of other emotions along with the shock. So we have the fear, we have the sadness, we have the anxiety. Sometimes immediately hopelessness sets in. But once there is good support, I'm going to say this up front because we're going to come back to it, I'm sure. Once there's good support, that doesn't have to last long, or it doesn't have to be the full extent of the experience for their journey through cancer, treatment, and recovery.
Yes, and you know, you're speaking so wonderfully because I mean, we started breast cancer as our topic,
Mhm.
but you touched on cancer as a whole and
Yeah.
being diagnosed and
Mhm.
the distress because
Yeah.
it's distressing and we find ourselves just as you said, we're going 100 miles per minute,
100
and it's
miles.
all of the thoughts, all of the what ifs, all of the how do I's, and all those things come into being there. But the
Mhm.
actual breast cancer,
Yeah.
how does this develop? What happens in our bodies that makes this happen?
Sure. Well, I will speak from the wellness perspective since I'm a psychologist and a wellness expert. But we know generally we all have cancer cells in our body and certain conditions. And I'm so glad you asked this question because there's certain internal and external conditions that can cause the cancer cells to increase in their growth. And if not addressed, they can take over and become dangerous. So sometimes we have benign things in our body, lumps or tumors, but sometimes they can become cancerous. What are some of the things that cause that? Let's start with the internal environment. Okay, so from the wellness perspective, we always talk about dysbiosis in the body. We talk about too much toxicity in the body and a lot of alkalinity, acidity, not alkalinity, acidity in the body. And believe it or not, one of the things that contributes to that is the experience of trauma. Research shows this. Many of our women who have gone through cancer diagnosis, treatment, and recovery, and even those that we have lost, many of them have had a trauma history. If we look from the psychological perspective and we look at what we call the ACEs score, the ACE is what we call the Adverse Childhood Experiences, ACE. There is a score that we would have for persons when we are assessing, and persons who have women, so we're talking about breast cancer, although men can also develop breast cancer, but women who have a really high ACE score have been shown statistically and through research to go on to develop lifestyle diseases, of which cancer is one of them. No, it doesn't mean if you have a high ACE score, you will have it, but it's very likely, especially if you have no intervention throughout your life in terms of therapy and health and wellness perspective. So I always say this, and we always say this in the wellness world. Um, Genetics load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. So we have trauma as a causative factor. We also have environmental things that are taking place. Diet and lifestyle are important. They tend to feed into the development of cancer, breast cancer especially. We know the research continues to show us that products that have a lot of metal, heavy metal in it, so that's why there are a lot of talks against the deodorants with aluminum, other toxic metals, and other toxic materials on a whole, not just metals, tend to feed that. Sugar is another major contributor. So a person who has a lifestyle that is high in sugar, and I'm not just talking about soft drink sugar, because we often tend to say, when we speak to persons, say, well, I don't put a lot of sugar in my tea. That is a small amount of sugar compared to what we're talking about. We're talking about sugar that also comes from refined foods. So that includes your macaroni pie, that includes your whitewashed rice, that includes your bakery goods. And we all, especially in the Caribbean, because part of our Caribbean culture is eating a lot of foods that in sugar. So these are some of the things that feed into it. And then we have about 30% of our cancers that are just genetic. In terms of, it is not so much a lifestyle issue, it's not so much a trauma issue, but there's something there with the makeup of the body that feeds into it. So there are many causes. And with breast cancer, these have been found to be linked to the development of the breast cancer.
Mentioned lifestyle, and
Mhm.
it's like you're reading my mind right now, because I that's where I went straight there.
Mm,
Mary is sole breadwinner, family
mm,
of, let's say, three, and Mary begins to feel lethargic and out of breath, and Mary decides, oh, let me go and see what is wrong with me. And Mary is diagnosed
Mhm.
with cancer. How does this tie into the rest of the members of the family? What is that like in your
Yeah.
experience?
Well, you asked a few questions earlier. One of them that often happens or comes to the mind of the person who's diagnosed is, what now? What do I do now? And that is a question that goes to the family. They now take on that question. What now? What do we do? And the impact varies based on who is in that family grouping. So, do we have children who are dependent? Sometimes the women may not even share that because they're afraid of causing distress because they're experiencing distress, but having that distress passed on to their children who may not be at the age to understand fully. You also have situations where the children are adult children and maybe going through their own stages and experiences in life. And you have the spouse. In Mary's case, you just mentioned there was a single breadwinner baby. She has partners or not, but there are other persons in her circle, her significant others, which would be a friend, her support base, her village, that all will be impacted and will need to come into the journey with her. It's important that we share. I know one of the things I've seen, and having worked with many clients who have gone through situations like this, one of the first things they want to do is, quote unquote, spare their family members from the trauma. And so they don't share. But that could be more disastrous than helpful because the reality is, first of all, you're carrying a secret. Then you're carrying, well, I would say first you're carrying a condition in your body that has the potential to become deadly if not addressed in promptly and in the most expansive ways. Then you're carrying a secret, and it's not a good secret. This secret is sort of like the secret that people have and carry when they've been arrested. They carry that. It's a burden. It's not a surprise party kind of secret. This is a burden. And then you have to now go through, if you're not sharing, that is, go through the different stages alone. And one of the things what we have found that have helped many cancer and breast cancer survivors make it is the power of their support system. Now, of course, that is one part of it, but we cannot underestimate the value of that. So the power of their support system, but what support can they give if you haven't shared? And I know it seems noble in many instances, or it may be just the fear that is taking over the logical thinking. But it's so important to share. Our doctors often say that. We had a doctor share just recently about prostate cancer. And his point was so important. We do not allow our family members to know what is in the family line. So family members think this is okay, this is new. It's not new. If you don't share, they don't know what they're up against. So sharing becomes important with the family. And those who are able to come along with you on that journey of treatment and doctor visits and just sitting with you and sharing memories in those moments when you need something to lift you up, they can come along and also receive support. So many times only the survivor or the person with the diagnosis, I almost said victim, comes for therapy. But so many times a family approach is very much necessary. So the family goes through this condition with you. You may think this is just my problem. I guarantee you it is not. Because although they may not hurt in the way you hurt, and they may not be able to feel the physical pains that you feel, they hurt and they're feeling pain as well. All right. So it's important to share, allow the family to come into as many as can and as you feel comfortable with, come along the journey with you in the tangible ways and the emotional and moral supportive ways. And if necessary, and whenever you decide to do that, allow them to be a part of any treatment or therapy, psychotherapy approaches that you may engage in.
Yes, and I love the words that you're using, because support is it's so important. Your
Mhm.
family is they're along the journey with you. And on that note, we are going to take a break. We're going to be right back with more Brunch, a Taste of Tobago. I have so many questions that I want to ask. So we're going to take a break and we're going to come right back with more on breast cancer and mental health. See you guys soon. We are back with Brunch, a Taste of Tobago. Oh, a conversation that I've been waiting for so long. Breast cancer and its effect on mental health. And we're going to delve in just a bit more on what this means, on what this entails. And we are back, we are back, we are back. Welcome back to you. And
Thank
thank you for
you. Thank you for
talking with
having
me.
me.
Thank you for giving me your time. Billie Sterling Lewis, guys, joins us. For those of you who are just joining, we are speaking on breast cancer and its effects on mental health. And my question, what is the conversation like? Are we more open
Mm.
to discussion where breast cancer is concerned? Tell me your thoughts.
From my observation, it's getting much better. It's getting much better. Now, there's always room for improvement, but we're getting better. Women are more comfortable sharing about what they're experiencing. For instance, we wouldn't easily talk about, although I just put my hand there, it's just so subconscious. We wouldn't talk about what's happening with our breast because it's so sacred. And if something goes wrong with the breast or any of our parts that speak to our femininity, it feels off. It feels, because of the sacredness of these body parts, we feel as if something is wrong with us. And so we have more women, thank God, sharing about their experiences to the point where we have some persons, mostly in the developed world, and I've known of a few, who actually are preventing breast cancer by doing the surgeries because they know their chances are high after running specific tests. We also have that generational discussion I about earlier. Women are now able to talk to younger girls about what it looks like, and not just from the medical perspective, because sometimes the medical mumbo jumbo can cause our young people to get lost. But from that real perspective, from that human perspective, from the female perspective that says, hey, if you feel your breast and there's something going on, come and tell me. Remember, around your period, there's something else going on that may cause some feelings of some lump feels, but still come and say something. That openness is increasing more and more. And then we have the impact of this media that's helping to make the conversation easier. So even sometimes persons may not know how to start or what to say. They have conversation starters that they could find on reputable websites. So the conversation is happening. And I want to talk about this one also, because this is very important, especially the psychological and emotional perspective. The conversation with their spouses and their lovers. Many women go through the body changes as from stage one right down to remission and the body changing and healing again. For instance, a woman who has to have her breast removed, that is a major blow to their self-esteem, their self-image, their feelings of femininity. And having that conversation with their spouse or their lover that allows them to hopefully, because there's some women who do experience rejection with breast cancer diagnosis, believe it or not, but with supportive partners, they're able to talk openly about how they feel, about how less sexy they feel, about how less valuable they feel in the relationship. Some years ago, I remember encountering a situation where the woman was diagnosed with cancer, and she talked about how much her husband just took his hands off of her. He wouldn't touch her. And it wasn't in a repulsive because when she sat and had a conversation with him, he just said, I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know if you were feeling pain. And when I did see you having painful experiences, I didn't want to add by touching you. And she shared that she had to say to her husband, but I wanted you to touch me. I wanted to still feel like I was sexually satisfying or
And
appealing to you.
attractive.
Um,
Yes.
yes, and attractive. And so these conversations have different purposes, and they happen in different places with different persons, but they are so important.
Yeah, and you're speaking on the human aspect of things, and
Mhm.
sometimes we forget and we leave that's completely out of the conversation. But you're bringing
Yeah.
in the human aspect of things, and that discussion, that openness with your loved ones is so so very important. We just have a few seconds more, but before we wrap, um, the importance of breast examinations, going to the doctor. I still know of persons who are not scared, but who are very hesitant when it
Yeah.
comes to going to the doctor. So let's just speak on that. Let's just speak on the importance. Oh my gosh, plead with my kings and queens today on the
Yes.
importance
Yes.
of going and checking out and making sure that we're all right.
Yes, I love the fact that you say plead with my kings and queens, because you know what? The men can be a part of it as well. And it
Yes.
starts very simply, like I shared earlier. Become familiar with your body. Know what your body feels like. Know what your body smells like when it's hot and sweaty, and when it's just had a shower, when you ate garlic or when you ate strawberries or broccoli, because it has different scents. It's interesting we're talking about breast cancer, but endometrial cancer is also another one that women go through, and this shows changes. But let's stick with the breast cancer. But know what your body feels like, and one of the ways to do that is to constantly be in contact with your body. As a matter of fact, we teach the power of touch as a healing perspective in psychology, right? But for this one, it's not just loving your body and touching it, but being the first investigator of your body and what's going on. And you can bring your husband and your partner along. They can become a part of knowing what it feels like, know what a period, pre or post period breast looks and feels like. See what's happening. If there's something coming out of your breast, any oozing, white or colorless from your nipples, that's not healthy and that's not normal. And so you want to go check your doctor. If you find burning or itching that is incessant, you want to go and get checked out right away. And listen, there's some persons who still get anxious going to a doctor. If it takes support, if it takes the needs for support, get someone to go along with you and have that open discussion with your doctor. If you're one of those who become so anxious that when you get to the doctor, you can't remember anything, before you get to the doctor, get your journal, your notepad, and write down what you want to say. Write down what you want to ask and walk with your book. Don't be ashamed. And when you go to the doctor, say, Doc, open your book. This is what I want to ask. Because at that time, you're so fearful, you're so anxious, you don't remember stuff. Also, please remember diet and lifestyle. And diet and lifestyle is inclusive of what is eating you. So I say this all the time. Dr. Cindy Trim made this so popular. It is not only what we eat that's destroying us, but also what is eating us. There's so many psycho-emotional issues that are eating away at our peace, increasing cortisol levels in our body, causing high levels of distress. And it feeds into the imbalance that can take place, that can lead to cancer. Remember, I talked about the ACEs score and its linked with breast cancer and other cancers, right? Now, what you're eating becomes important. If you can go, let me say this quickly. We talk about frequency and energy in the body, not on a healthy, ungodly talk at all. It's talking about the energy level or electrical level in our bodies. Whole foods give us the highest levels of frequency. That means foods that have not been altered by chemical engineering or destroyed too much by processing and cooking and frying. So as much as you can eat, I love the 80-20 rule. If you're in a cancer diagnosis, you want to go 100% or at least 90-10. Make sure your foods are wholesome. Make sure your foods are live foods. And so you want to put away the can, the bottle, the salted stuff, especially those foods that have no nutrients at all. And then you want to move. You want to have a lifestyle where you are moving. That means walking, exercise. You don't have to become a gym buff, a gym rat, or become buff and or weight bulky from weightlifting, but you want to have a lifestyle where you are moving. And then the other important thing, believe it or not, is you want to have a lifestyle where there is healthy, loving support. And I've been saying this over and over again, and it's proven. We do this a lot in wellness and psychotherapy. The impact and the power of support on healing and wholeness, and even prevention, cannot be compared to many other things. So, having the power of touch, not just sexual touch, I'm talking about hugs that heal. I'm talking about conversations that relax. I'm talking about just being in the presence of people that add wholeness and healing to your body. These are things that can begin to help you prevent, but also, if you're already there, help you on the journey. Please cut out the processed foods, cut out the sugars, cut out the packaged foods. The preschools tell us all the time. I remember my preschool teachers at Montgomery used to always send a message home: no shiny snacks. And we say, okay, we don't give our children any shiny snacks, but we're eating the
Yes.
shiny snacks. They're
Yes.
not good for us either.
Yes.
So if
And
we
you
can
know,
limit those things, we have a lot of way that we can get in wholeness and healing.
yes, and I have nothing else to say. You said it so well. And I want to thank you so much for being a part of Brunch, A Taste of Tobago. Thank you for imparting such knowledge. And I'm hoping that the narrative will change. I'm hoping that the conversations will be positive going forward. So, from our family to yours, we wish you blessings, peace, and love, and of course, success in whatever you endeavor to do. We are going to
Thank you.
take a break, guys. We are going to be right back with more Brunch, A Taste of Tobago. But before I do that, our trivia question for today. There is a wonderful novel that was written and it was based on Tobago. What was the name of that novel? So you guys get to typing. We're going to be right back with our eye on bagel feature. Stacey Herbert joins us when Brunch returns. See you guys soon.